Welcome back, I'm GTGD, and in this video, video 6, I'm going to get my time system working and have day and night. So the environment light, so that global light that we set up previously, using the time of day will change its color. So that's what you'll see in this video. Okay, so in Unity, what I would like to do is to set up a UI for that time. But before I just jump into that, I just wanted to just touch on that camera again from the last video. You know how I selected third person follow? So I looked into the original project that I made for this, and I had selected just a transposer, and it was locked to target. And I just set this down to like -5, and that also works. So that's also another option as well for getting the camera to follow the player smoothly. Oh, and I didn't explain something as well. Like if you really are not interested in a smooth camera follow, that sort of, when the player stops moving, then the camera just sort of slowly moves up to them, then just turn this off. And what you can do is just take the camera itself and just drop it on the player, so it becomes a child game object of the player, and so wherever the player goes, the camera is automatically taken with the player. So if I ran that, you'll see that that's what the case is. I guess it makes for a lighter weight game, but you just won't get that sort of smooth, when the player stops moving, the camera will smoothly stop at the player. So that's what the difference there is. Anyway, I'm going to revert this back and just turn the virtual camera back on. And now I'll work on the UI. So UI, canvas, and I'm going to call this like canvas clock. And then I'll add a panel. And I'm going to just set its anchor up at the top. I'll press Alt as well. I'll have to do that again anyway. And I'll just set it to something like 300 wide. It probably doesn't even need that much. 100 high. And now I'll move it. I'll use Alt and then hit this icon over there. It'll move it up. And I don't want to see it. I don't need to see the panel. So I'm just going to turn its, basically just move its opacity right down. So it'll be invisible. I am going to add a component to this. So I'm going to add a horizontal layout group. And this will help just sort the other UI elements for me automatically. I won't have to manually position them in the UI, and I should just have a look at the UI in the scene view. Just move it up there. That's what I was talking about. The UIs can be huge relative to the game world when you're working on them. And I'm just going to turn off this child force expand. This will force the UI elements that I add to take up all of the space in the UI. That's not what I'm after. I want it to instead respect the size of the child UI elements that I'm going to add. So I'm saying use child scale. And I'm also going to put its alignment to middle center. So it's in the middle of the screen, well, the middle of that panel, basically. So that's how I like it to look. You can also add padding if it's getting close to the edges and stuff. But in this case, I think that's just about fine. Now I'm going to add a UI text Mesh Pro. This is the sharp looking text. So the normal Unity text can look a bit blurry, but Text Mesh Pro looks really sharp. So we're going to do that. We'll ask us to import the Text Mesh Pro Essentials, so just do that. Alright, so that was nice and fast. And that's Text Mesh Pro. So this is a text object here, and I'm actually going to call this text hours. And I'm going to just adjust it. You can see it's very big here. And I'm just going to put here like 24, and the minutes I'm going to put as 60, something like that. I'm going to change its alignment all to centered. I'll leave the font size. I'm going to change the font shortly. And I'm just going to set the width of this UI element to like 50. Leave it 50 high. That's about right. Now I'm going to just duplicate that twice. And this one I'm going to call it text colon. And I'm just going to put a colon in there to represent the clock. And I'm going to make this a bit smaller, like 20 in width. So you can see it already compressing. And it's that horizontal layout element there, that horizontal layout group rather. That's what's allowing us to just sort this automatically for us. Just makes life a bit easier. And for this one, I'll just call it minutes. And I'll just put here 60. This is just for me. It's going to immediately change by script. The script is going to update this. And obviously, there's no such thing as 24. You always hit to 00. We will have that by code as well. Now, let's go ahead and change our font. Now, I'm just looking for like a pixel font. So you can just do a search, Google search for pixel font. And well, this website here just happens to have a decent one that I like. It's called Minecraft. And it's a Minecraft-like font, so I'll just download that. And then I'll bring it into my project. Alright, so I'll just copy that. And I'm thinking about it. I think I'll just make a new folder here. I'm just going to make a new folder, call it fonts. And I guess I'll just open that up. And I've pasted in the new font. Can close that down, and inside of it now select the font. To be able to use it with TextMesh Pro, you select it and then you go to select it and then right click on it and create a, where is it, it's a TextMesh Pro font asset. So that's what you'll want to do, and it just automatically makes a font asset for us. I can now select all of these, shift select all of them, and in the slot for the font I can just drop this in. I could have just selected the icon here and changed it. But there we go. That's our font sorted out. And that's our UI sorted out. Okay, next thing I'll do, just make an empty game object. And I'm just going to call it Game Manager. And I'm going to make a new script. And I'm going to call it Game Manager _time. And just open it up. Okay, so what do I want this script to do for me? I want it to be able to set that UI time. Obviously, I want it to create this 24-hour time as well for our game world. I want it to be able to, we can set whatever speed of time we want as well as the developer. I want it to be able to change the light color, the global light color as well based on the time. I also wanted to send out an event, a C# event, whenever the hour changes. And this will be useful in later videos. When we do in the next video, we'll do the player light, and a bit later we'll do AI as well, and our AI's behavior, where they're basically, which waypoints they're going to, will change based on the hour. So that's what we can do. So that's what I'm going to have this script do for me. So the very first thing is using Unity engine, and it's a bit funny, but it's going to be experimental.rendering.universal. So those 2D lights are still considered in the experimental category, I guess. One day in the future, I think you won't need to use the word experimental. You'll basically be using, you'll just go directly Unity engine.rendering, perhaps.universal. In the future, things will change. Definitely Unity will change things as time goes on. But right now, that's what you have to do to be able to access the global light. Otherwise, you won't be able to make a variable for it, which is what I want to do. And what I just did there was using TM Pro, because I want to be able to access the TextMesh Pro text on the hour and minutes UI that I had just made. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and make up a whole bunch of variables. So public float minutes is equal to 300. This is our main variable. Basically, this is capturing how many minutes, what the current time is right now. And I just want you to remember that there's 1,440 minutes in a day. So if you do 24 hours times 60 minutes, that gives you 1440. And so this is just a starting time. I'm going to change it in the inspector anyway. So if I just save that, I can just put this on inside of Unity as well. So why don't I just do that? Go to the game manager and drop the script on. You can see that, and I can just adjust this to whatever I needed. So going back, so let's add the other variables in. So we're going to have a private int minutes to display, and I'm just going to do here comma, because I've got 3 ints I want to create here. You don't have to put them on each line. It does make it more readable to have them on each line, that's true. But sometimes I just do this. I'm not consistent in how I do this. So hours to display, and then the next variable is previous hours to display. And this will make sense what they're for in a bit. Next lot are a whole bunch of floats, like 5 of them. So I'm gonna just make a private float, and I'm gonna call this one percentage day completed. This will be for the coloration of the day. It'll help with determining that color. And in there, then the next variable will be like max minutes. This is what we're talking about, max minutes in a day. So it's equal to equal to 1440. And then I'm going to have here time increment is equal to 1, then comma. Next thing is next increment. You're going to see how I use these to control the rate of stuff happening in update shortly. Next increment, and then finally next rate is equal to 1. So that's 5 floats right there I've defined. Alright, now I'm going to have my gradient. So public gradient. Let's call it gradient. And then I'm going to have a public light 2D. And this is my, what I call it, the environment light. Okay, so if I just save that and just jump to Unity, you'll be able to see that right now. So there's our gradient object. We're going to set up the light color for the day shortly. In fact, pretty soon. For the environment light, I'll just plug in that global 2D light. And that's where, back in the script, if I didn't add this in, I wouldn't have been able to make this variable. Simple as that. Okay, and then the next thing I'm going to do is public TMP text. So I'll have to do underscore TMP text, hours text, and the next one is public TMP text, minutes text. And again, I'll go to Unity, just slot them in. This is referring to my UI, so I'm going to adjust what's inside of the UI by code. So that's text hours, and that's text minutes. Done. Okay, next, public delegate void time changed event handler. Okay, so this won't make very much sense if you've not seen it before, and it's going to be of the type, I'm going to use it to pass data in the form of an integer, and I'm just calling it hours because that's what I'm actually going to send out. That's more for me to understand. And now using that delegate, I'm going to create an event of it. It's a C# event. So public event time, it's of the type time changed event handler, and I'm just going to call it event time changed. Okay, and I'm just going to save that. Okay, so you're going to see how I use a C# event. That's when the hour changes, I'm going to send out a message. It's just a broadcast, and whatever other script is subscribed to that broadcast will get this data, this hours. They'll get the current hours, and then I can use that data to then do stuff. So for example, I can turn on the player's light, or I can turn off the player's light, or I can tell the AI, okay, you should be doing something else. So example, the gardener AI, stop walking around in the garden doing gardening, go to the house, and you can start eating now because it's lunchtime or whatever. So that's what you can do with events, and it's a very efficient way to take care of that sort of stuff rather than having each of those other game objects accessing the script from time to time and trying to gather this information from the script. It's much more efficient for that sort of a thing to send out a broadcast, and the subscribers will get that data as they need it. Now I am going to use both the start and update methods, and I'm just so that I don't forget, I'm just going to set it right now. I'm just going to use these, I think they're // to comment. This is a comment, so it's not actually code, it's just for us to read. And I'm going to put set light gradient, but I'm just happening to write the actual method name right now, so that's what I know what I'll be calling it. The next one is set clock, and that's our objective. We're going to write methods to do these things, and then here I'm going to have another one that I will make called increment time, and I'm also going to have two other methods like make time faster, and I'm going to have make time normal. So depending if the player does anything, if they press some button, then we can make the time faster. If they press a button, it'll make the time normal. It's more for development actually, rather than for the player, because you could make some UI. I don't make any UI for it in this project, but you could do that, and that gives the option for the player to speed up time. But it's just the clock that gets sped up. So if you want the actual characters and stuff to move faster and stuff, then you have to adjust their speed and so on, basically. Okay, so let's make our increment time method. So void increment time. And what I'm going to say here inside of it, I'm going to say if time dot time. So this is the actual current game time inside of your game. When you launch the game, it'll start at, I think it starts at 0, and the time increments as per normal seconds. So as per your normal seconds, it'll start incrementing. And what I'm just saying is that I don't want this code to run every update frame. I would like the contents that will come past that I'm about to write. I don't want it to be executed every single frame. That's crazy. I want to control when it happens. I only want it to happen, this code to happen as per basically the next rate, so that the rate at which time will flow. So I will change that. I guess I can change that rate by code. So okay, let me just keep going and it'll make a bit more sense, hopefully. So if time.time is less than next increment, then all I'm going to say, so if our time has not yet reached a point where it's bigger than the next increment, just jump out of this method, get out of here. So just return nothing. It's a void type of method, so it's an empty, I mean it's a method that doesn't return anything, so you can just write return. You don't have to write anything for it to return. It's just simply going to cause it to exit out of the method and not execute the rest of the code. Okay, but let's say time.time is greater than this variable called next increment. Then I'm going to update next increment to equal time.time plus next rate. Okay, so this way, by controlling it this way, so this check is only going to be done every second and not like 200 times a second or 60 times a second or 30 times a second based on how many frames you're having per second. As you see in the profiler, you know, the FPS there, the frames per second. So that's this update. It'll be running that many times in a second. So we're going to control how many times it runs in a second by doing this. Okay, and then I'm going to say minutes is plus equal to time increment. And this is the important part. So this is actually our game time. And now I'm adding that time increment of 1. So whenever this code executes, it's going to add 1 to minutes. You could have written this as, you know, minutes is equal to minutes plus time increment. That's actually the same thing. So these two lines here are exactly the same code. It's really up to you how you want to write it. I just write it like this because that's what I've gotten used to. So I'll just delete that. And I guess what I have to also check is that when I'm incrementing minutes, don't let it get more than the possible minutes in a day, right? There are only 1,440 minutes in a day. So don't let minutes go to 1,441. So if minutes is greater than or equal to max minutes in a day, then in that case, just set minutes to 0. So we've reached the new day, basically. So minutes is equal to 0. Okay, and I guess I'm going to have this, what I'll do these same things here. I'll set the light gradient, and I'm going to set the clock as well by code here when we increment time. So that'll keep the clock updated, and it'll keep the color of the world light updated as well. Okay, so next method I'm going to make here is to actually, set the clock. So if I've got void increment time, so I need to set, well, I'll set the light gradient and then I'll set the clock. So I'll set here, I'll just write here. So if I just copy this to make my life a bit easier. So void set light gradient and create a new method. Okay, so we've got the name there. And I can uncomment these out now. Now they're ready to be called upon, not throw an error. Okay, so what am I going to do here? I'm actually going to calculate the percentage of the day completed and then pass this to the gradient and tell it to calculate, what the light color is, what the applicable color is now, and that'll get passed into the lights, so the lights color itself. So just thinking about it now, maybe right now makes sense. Perhaps it makes sense to go ahead and set up this gradient. So why don't I do that? You can add basically up to 8 keys in the bottom. So the bottom is where you actually set the color. So if I just select that one here, and I'm going to go into the blue area, somewhere about there, and I'm going to set it pretty dark. And I'll just create another key. And just the thing to remember is that in a day, so this is 100%. So this is just a percentage scale. It goes from 0 to 100%. So about 6 a.m. is about 25% of the day, right? So just before that, I'm going to actually change the world color about like 22% or something like that. I'm going to start making it, or maybe I will actually stick around. No, I'll take it up further up. Otherwise, it'll get too bright. Perhaps sooner than I would like it to. And now I just need to pick a sort of a nice yellow color for the morning. And I need to add another key here because, the yellow is extending way too back. So I'm just going to use the color picker tool, pick that, and do something very much like that. And we can play around with this later when we see that actually in action. Then we can decide whether we like it or not. Right, so, after the sun starts to rise, I want the world color to basically just go to white. So thereabouts. So there's this time period where there's a yellow tint to the world, and then it becomes a white sunlight. And then about here too, I add another key thereabouts. And I guess I'm going to add, when the sun is setting, I'd like it to go to a very reddish sort of a tint. Something reddish orange, perhaps something like that. So the whole world will get that color. And then once again, so I'll just select this and change it to the night color. And I'll make another key here, which also has the night color. Just a little bit on the, the brighter side. And what this will do is that, and I'll change this one too, it shouldn't be so dark as it's approaching the dawn. I suppose it is actually it is pretty dark till the sun starts to rise. But anyway, I'll put it a bit like this. It's just a personal preference thing. And that's pretty much our gradient sorted there. Just double check. But I think I have to bring this one back a little bit. Otherwise it'll be too late, so the afternoon is running for too long. Yeah, actually, I don't want the afternoon running for that long. Let's bring it all back. Because that's 6 p.m. So I don't want it too late. Well, it's up to you, really, because that's how you can control how long your daylight colors last for, how long your nighttime colors last for. So it's really up to you. Anyway, that's what I'm doing for the gradient, and that's set now. Let's go back to the code. So in that code, so I'm saying to set that light gradient, I guess all I have to do is say percentage of day completed is quite simply equal to minutes over max minutes in a day. So very simple. And then I'm just going to set the environment light color. Environment light dot color is equal to gradient. That's our very gradient that we were working on. Evaluate percentage day completed. It's just that simple. That will set the light color. Super nice and simple. And if I just uncomment this one here, so increment time, that's pretty good. And I would think that actually this will run. You won't see the clock update. So if I just quickly come here and just quickly run that. There you go. It is changing the light color of the world. So if I set it like 600, which is morning, set it 5:30. What will happen at 5:30? Okay, so perhaps the yellow's on the weaker side. Let's try 500. Let's try 450. Let's try 430. Yeah, so my morning is at about 400. I see. Okay, well, there's a bit of a yellow tinge. If that's not strong enough, bump it up, whatever. And like, this is night. That's deep in the night. So let's go to 1,000 maybe minutes. Which probably will become afternoon pretty soon. Yeah, that's all. It's almost, the sun is almost set. So 1050. Yeah, okay. The afternoon colors are alright. Okay, so that's just a bit of fiddling around there. Now let's go ahead and make the clock method. So void set clock is the next method that I'll make. And we've got a bit to do in this, so I'm going to say in here hours to display is equal to mathf dot floor to int. And what is it that I'm going to pass? I'm going to pass in minutes divided by 60. So what this is going to do, it's going to take that minutes variable that we're playing with there just a moments ago. Let's say it's like 1200 or something, or some odd, awkward number, rather, maybe not 1200, like 1215 to 1215, and you divide it by 60, you'll obviously get a number with a decimal after it. So all this is saying is, yeah, and obviously if you divide by 60, you're getting the number of hours, and the remainder fraction, that's how much of a fraction of an hour remaining. That's what you're getting when you do this very simple calc. But this method here, I mean, it is actually a method that we're calling upon. What it does, it basically takes that number and drops it to the lowest int that it can be. So if it for example was calculated and became 6.3, it's going to drop it to 6, and I get the number 6 as an integer, which I can then use to put on my clock on the hours text. Okay, so let's keep advancing here. The next thing I want to say is, if this hours to display has become greater than or equal to 24, and you never see 24, right? So that's why I said equal to as well. If hours is to display is greater than or equal to 24, then just set it to 0. So that means we've started the new day. Okay, and I'm going to just say minutes to display is equal to, and I'm going to convert the minutes variable from a float to an integer. So the minutes to display is minutes minus, and I guess I'll put in here, I'm going to actually do a calculation here. I'm going to convert the whole result of that calculation into an integer. So it's hours to display, so minutes minus hours to display times 60 and f. I have to just put here f to tell it that it's a float calculation and to keep the decimal places while doing it. So that otherwise the number 60 is an integer. This is a float. The two multiplied together, it might change it to an integer or something and lose the decimal place. I don't want it to do that. So just telling it by code, and just telling it there, just don't do that. And what this is doing, this is giving us that fraction. So for example, if there was 6.3, if we were at 6.3 hours, then this is actually telling it to do that. This is then going back to the value of the minutes. So, and then subtracting that, for example, 6, and then minus 6 times 60, which will be the full amount of minutes, and by converting it to an int, that's how many minutes to display on the minutes part of the clock. So very, very simple. You can try plugging in a few numbers and then seeing how that calculation works. I don't want to embarrass myself here and fool around and make a mess, so you can try plugging in a few numbers and just see what happens. You'll see that you'll get minutes back, which you can put in the clock. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is this is for the event, so I'm gonna set up an event as well. So if previous hours to display is not equal, so that exclamation mark equal means is not equal to hours to display. So the hours to display is the one that keeps getting updated, as you just saw. Is not equal to hours to display. That means time has changed, a whole hour has changed, and we should send out an event. That's what I'm trying to say here. But first of all, just update this variable. Previous hours to display is equal to hours to display, and now I'm going to call that event. We'll write the event later, shortly, and put that in there. And I guess finally, we can actually assign the values to the hours text. So hours text.text is equal to hours to display, and .toString, and it's going to be in the string format of D2. This will make sure that it keeps, how would you say, it keeps two characters in the display. So for example, if you have minutes and you're basically at 5, let's say it's 5 minutes, it'll still display the time as 05 rather than just a 5. So you won't just have, let's say it's 5 past 6 basically. So you won't have 6:5. You'll have 06:05. That's what I want to have here. And you can just go look this you can go look up on the MSDN I guess the MSDN documentation, so for Visual Studio and for C#, and this is a C# thing, so you can see there's lots of different ways to convert a string and change how it should display, with decimal places and whatever. You can control how many decimal places and that sort of stuff. And so minutes text dot text is equal to minutes to display .toString. Okay, and again, just D2 format. Alright, so that's pretty much that. So now this will work once I allow it to call. So just start calling set clock, both here in the increment time method and also in the start method. So that'll set the clock. And I'm going to set up that event. But you know what? Let's just jump into Unity and see it run. And there we go. So, okay, so 300 is 5 a.m. So if I add 350, yep, okay, that makes sense. So that's now 5:50 in the morning. So great, you can see our time is incrementing. Great. Okay, let's jump back to the code. Okay, so now I'm going to make an event. So I'm going to say public void call event time changed. Well, it's more like I'm just making a method that will actually call the event. So, and in this method, I have to pass in int hours to transmit. I'm just making up the names, of course, of the variable to pass in. But, our event requires that there's some data transferred. So this hours. So that's why I need to do this. In this method, I'm going to pass in the hours to transmit. And I can actually do that now. So over here, I'm going to actually call the event. So I'm going to say call event time changed, and I'm going to put in here hours to display. So that's what will be used by those other scripts to check what hour it is. Now coming back to the event, let's actually fill it in now. So if event time changed is not equal to null, then we'll do some code. So basically, if there are no subscribers to this event, don't do anything. There's no point sending out a broadcast. But if there is stuff subscribed, then we're going to send out a broadcast. Event time changed and hours to transmit. There we go. So that's pretty much it. So now I'm basically sending out an event, and anyone listening will use that data. They'll receive the data and they can do something with it. Okay, now I'm just going to add these two other methods. They're really more for us. They're not for the game. So void make time faster. And inside of this method, I'm just going to say if input dot get key down, and what's that? Key code dot equals. So if I press the equals key on my keyboard, then I want the following to happen, which is quite simple. The time increment becomes 10. So then this is gonna, the clock is gonna change much faster. Because if we go up here and we look at our time increment, so our minutes is plus equal to time increment. So if it's 10, minutes is gonna advance much faster every second. So remember, our update runs, our code in update runs every second. So the time is updated every second. So if I suddenly said to it that in the game world, 10 seconds in real life, so in our time, if 1 second passes, in the game world, 10 seconds passes. That's basically what I'm saying. And I can change that to any number, whatever, like that. So then next one is void make time normal. And I'm just going to copy this code here just to make my life a bit easier. Paste it in. And instead of equals, it's going to be minus. So the key right next to it. And let's just set it back to 1. So that's pretty cool. And let's go up here and just uncomment these. And I wrote it correctly. So it's all good. Now, otherwise, just come and just update it to the correct name. This is what it needs. So just copy and paste that or type it in however works for you. And I'd say that's pretty much it. So I'm going to save that, jump to Unity, and go ahead and save it as well, and run it. So yeah, sometimes the UI disappears like that, just a Unity thing. It's okay, just hit play and then it will come back. I don't know why it does that, but it's just a Unity thing there. It's just one of those quirks. And if I hit my, first select the game view, make sure the game view is selected, and then if I hit the equals button, then time is now advancing much faster, as you can see. And yeah, I can see the color advancing quickly of the day, which is really nice. And yeah, it's becoming nice and bright. Oh yeah, there's the nice white light color, which is what I like probably the most. And I can just advance time here as well a lot. So put it like 900, for example. And it's starting to become the afternoon, and it will start to become red somewhere along the way. We can just watch it for a moment. In the next video, yeah, it's getting dark now. You can see that the afternoon is setting in, and it's becoming all red, and then now it's going to become blue, and then it'll become a darker shade of blue, and deep into the night it will be very dark. And it is very dark. And what I want to do in the next video is to make use of that event that I've got there. I'm going to give the player a light, a simple light. And when that event, basically, and the player will have a script, and when they get the hours, they'll check what hour, they'll basically check what hour it is, and then they'll know, okay, I better turn the light on or I better turn the light off. Simple as that. So I guess that's pretty much that. I'll just stop running this for a moment. You can see it's really dark now, which is good. You can change the color to whatever is pleasing to you. And I guess that pretty much wraps it up for this video. So I'll see you in the next one.